New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara pulled no punches when it came to discussing the issues that have plagued the team in the recent past and how they've changed going into 2024. We got all of that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network on SI. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, bringing you some of the bigger sort of 30,000 foot view big topics from our first day of training camp. If you want some of the smaller notes, bunch of the big things, stuff like that, you can go and check out yesterday's live episode, but wanted to come back and give you another episode for the morning to get you ready for day two and then kind of take again sort of that larger overview of some of the bigger topics throughout the day. So we're going to take a look at whether or not the New Orleans Saints should be looking in the free agent market for running backs, especially after another injury sustained by second-year running back Kendre Miller. There are still some solid free agent options available. We'll highlight those. We're also going to take a look at how the New Orleans Saints offensive scheme looks going into training camp. What was a little bit different than what we saw during OTAs and minicamp? We'll take a look at some of that. But the big difference that I want to look at is how the New Orleans Saints are simply different in 2024 than they were in 2023 when it came to training camp. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my observations on that. But we're also going to hear from New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara, who was very upfront about this very topic. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day here on the show and for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, our show today is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara was outstanding at the podium. Broke down in yesterday's episode a bit more of the things that he talked about when it came to his contract, but we also got his thoughts on how things are simply different for this team. And one of the big things that he discussed was accountability and how accountability is much different here in 2024 than it has been in terms of generating and sometimes even supporting or bolstering the issues that have plagued them over the course of recent years. So before we continue with our conversation here, let me show you what it is that Alvin Kamara had to say on this very subject.
It's a different kind of accountability, I think. And I think like we've been good around here, it was just unspoken. Like it was certain shit that you just don't do, and it was certain shit that you do. And when you keep that right there how it is, then good shit happens. When that flips and you kind of let a couple things here slide and a couple things there slide, then you get the result you got the past 2 years. And it accumulates and it compounds and it turns into some shit you don't want. It turns into a mess.
All right, I tried to bleep out all of the swear words there for you, but look, swear words aside, Alvin Kamara has always been brutally honest around what it is that the New Orleans Saints have struggled with. And one of the things that he has talked about consistently over the course of the past few years is accountability. And you heard him at the very beginning there. That was a follow-up to my question around how things have changed going into 2024 after he was talking about some of the issues that had caused or that had kind of held the Saints back over the course of the past couple of years. And the accountability sounds like it's in a different place. I want to give you a couple of examples that we saw throughout practice that kind of give you an idea of that. Not Alvin Kamara, but Dennis Allen goes out with the defense at the very beginning of practice, and they all do up downs forever and everything to start off practice. Dennis Allen said that it's something that started with Greg Williams and that they have continuously done and stuff like that. But that was the first time that I had seen it. And so right after that, what happens? Cam Jordan comes out, rallies the defense, gives a rousing speech, kind of tries to pump up the defense, who arguably had the better day when it came to the offense and the defense during the first day of training camp. There was some accountability there. There was some leadership and togetherness that was driven by Dennis Allen, and then some leadership and togetherness that was furthered by one of the team's most important leaders on the defensive side of the football, and really, regardless of what side of the football, in Cam Jordan. So that's one example. Another one is a guy like Alontae Taylor, who is engaged presently in what feels like a battle with fellow cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry, one that we didn't really get to see play out the first day of training camp, but we'll probably see as they move into more three cornerback sets, nickelback sets, things like that. But he's over there helping Kool-Aid McKinstry and giving him pointers and all the very guy that he's competing with. And so there's a sense of responsibility, player to player, coach to player, player to coach, that just seems and feels a little bit different than maybe what we have seen over the course of the past few years. And one of the things that Alvin Kamara always points back to are fumbling issues, right? Going into a game and a fumble happening in a game, that's one part, but that's not the whole story. It's not just that fumble happened in that game. Maybe that player has had fumbling issues in practice and no one said anything. Instead of punishing that player or removing that player or saying, hey, you're falling back here, whatever that discipline might be. Think Sean Payton. Sean Payton once benched his starting running back, Mark Ingram, because he fumbled in a game. Sean Payton used to tell this team that anytime that you have the ball in your hands, you're carrying the hopes and dreams of every single fan in New Orleans and every single New Orleans Saints fan. So don't you dare drop it. There was a sense of accountability. And in some cases, there was the sense of a threat of discipline in those instances where maybe that fumble might happen, that kind of kept you from ever being willing to cross that threshold. And so what you're hearing from Alvin Kamara here is that those types of, or that lack rather of accountability, that lack of responsibility that then generates, the ripple effect just didn't exist over the course of the past couple of years. But now it sounds like things are kind of trending in the right direction. One of the other things that Alvin Kamara said to me that I thought was very poignant was that he mentioned that, look, when you're, and I'm paraphrasing here, but when you're in a situation to where you're seeing a lot of things that are not going well for your team, people start disappearing. And then Alvin Kamara looked directly at me off of the podium and said, and a lot of people disappeared this offseason. I thought that was a pretty telling statement. That was a good observation, or not a good observation. It was an outstanding observation, but it was a good thing to point out for any fan out there, for any of us in media that have been looking at the New Orleans Saints and saying, boy, do they need a change. That was Alvin Kamara saying changes were made and effectively making a statement, not just about the people that did depart, but what about the statement that makes about the people that are still there? That shows a vote of trust. That shows a vote of responsibility. That shows a vote of accountability. That those people that did not disappear, that are still very much at the forefront of what it is that the New Orleans Saints want to be, identity-wise, DNA-wise, however it is that you want to look at it, that says something about those players, that they themselves did not disappear. That says something about those coaches, that they themselves did not disappear. I think it's a pretty loud statement and a pretty astute one on Alvin Kamara's part. So it just gives you an idea of kind of where things are a bit different. I would say that practice on Wednesday wasn't super intense. It kind of felt a little bit loose, which is to be understood when it comes to the first day of training camp, which is typically an acclimation day. Didn't see a lot of, ripping the ball here and there, letting it fly, all this other stuff. But did see a very focused practice. We saw new drills for the running backs. We saw Cam Jordan coaching guys off to the side. He was working really closely with Isaiah Foskey at one point. So you saw the shared responsibility of each one teach one, right? Which is such a classic staple of how to get better as a team. And so you see the accountability from the coaches, from the players, all that. And so I just thought that was a very, very good observation, or set of observations from Alvin Kamara. Wanted to share those with you. It's very clear that this is a different New Orleans Saints team going into 2024's training camp than maybe in previous years. Are they a better team? They'll have to answer that on the field once, toe hits leather against the Carolina Panthers in week 1 in the Superdome. But if you wanted to see changes, if you wanted to see something different, those changes, those differences are absolutely evident in watching this team right now. Coming up next, I want to tell you about the things that are different when it comes to the New Orleans Saints offense, what the scheme is looking like, what's different from year to year, but also what's different right now during training camp than what we saw during mini camps and OTAs. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best app that you can grab when it comes to checking out different events in your area, whether it's sports, which could be baseball, WNBA, basketball with the NBA. You could check out football with the NFL once it comes back, college football as well. But there's also other things like music in terms of concerts and stuff like that, comedy, theater as well. So if you're looking to get your culture on, Game Time is a great way to explore all the different events that are going on. And in many cases, tickets actually get cheaper as it gets closer to the beginning of the event. So go and check out Game Time because they'll help you be able to find some affordable tickets with moments of planning as opposed to months of planning, which is 100% my style. So go and check them out today where you can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Terms apply. That's your first order, okay? Your first purchase. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family, we saw a very focused practice by the New Orleans Saints as they opened up training camp on day one, but it was the patience on the offensive side that stood out most to me as a big difference between what we may have seen from this team over the course of the past couple of years and now going in with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak and his new offense. We appreciate you very much for being here and for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports Today's 24/7 stream as well. If you love hearing about NFL training camps, the 24/7 stream is the place to be. We've got stuff rolling from every single training camp from all around the NFL. Thanks to the outstanding coverage from our local experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So go and check that out on the Locked On Sports Today YouTube page and on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well. So I think that when I watched practice on Wednesday, the two things that really stood out were, well, really there were three things that stood out. The one thing that I really wanted to see, in addition to the observation that I had earlier, to where it didn't feel like they were really pressed to try to do much and wow and be a spectacle and all this other stuff. It was like kind of like, hey, take your time, get your legs under you, get acclimated, all this other stuff. But the second observation for me was seeing a continuation from what we saw in minicamp and OTAs. We still saw out of Derek Carr took 5 snaps the first team drill, right? They only had 2 team drills, but he took 5 snaps in the first one. And 4 of those 5 snaps, there was motion. In about 2 of those 5 snaps, we saw play action. So the percentage of motion and play action, which we saw skyrocket quite a bit during OTAs and minicamp and all this other stuff, that is maintained going in. And not only was that Derek Carr with the first team, we saw motion and play action for Nathan Peterman as the 4th quarterback taking snaps, who had the biggest completion of the day down the right sideline on a comeback to A.T. Perry. That has not changed. The DNA of what this team wants to build its identity out of is still very much intact from what we saw in the earlier offseason workout. So if, one of the things that I wanted to kind of see was, did they front load a lot of the motion and play action work during OTAs and minicamps just to kind of get everybody acclimated to it, get everybody accustomed to it, but then start to get into more of a realistic or start to pull back on a little bit once they got in the training camp and you're trying to install and maybe do things that are a little bit more simulated and stuff like that. No, not the case at all. They are very much, or it's not that it's not the case, but they're not pulling back to find what's realistic. They're expecting that this high volume of motion, this high volume of play action, all these things are a part of what it is that they're going to do. Not only did we see motion play action, we saw a pair of screens. Neither one really broke out or anything like that. One of them got blown up pretty quickly by Willie Gay, who I thought was the player that had, along with Demario Davis, the best day out on the practice field. But then another one going over to the opposite side had a little bit more potential. We wouldn't, seeing them actually doing this in pads or seeing them actually doing this in a game will tell us a lot because there's actually someone trying to tackle you. And especially in the screen game, it can be a little tough to try to gauge. But neither one of those looked like it was going to take much for him. But still, we saw the screen passes. And as we highlighted in a show the other day, we saw a lot of the drop off of the screen pass game between 2018, 2019, between those 2 seasons. And then it came to a point where you saw the percentage of screen passes come down. Then you saw the percentage of screen passes to running backs come down. Both of these screens were to running backs out of the backfield. And one of them with Alvin Kamara included motion. Derek Carr was in the shotgun. He had Alvin Kamara on his left side, while fullback Xander Horvath was on his right side. And then Alvin Kamara motioned from his left hip out wide to on the right side. So he crossed the field and then went up to the line of scrimmage, snapped the ball, quick pass to him, catch, turn up field, and then start to try to gain some yards. And so that part of the game is back. The routes out of the backfield are back. Everybody that is on the field on a passing play is a part of the progression. There's no decoy. There's no, this play only comes to this side of the field a certain percentage of times because it's only because the defense has to meet a certain criteria, right? Safety is over the top in the middle. And then, so if it's a cover one look and a corner doesn't get enough depth, then sure, okay, you'll take that one-on-one over to the easy side or whatever. No, it's nothing like that. Everybody is a part of the progression, and the Saints again continue to attack the middle of the field. So we talk about motion, we talk about play action, we talk about screens, we talk about everybody being a part of the trajectory. We talk a lot about the attacking the middle of the field. These are all things that are different from 2023 in terms of how the New Orleans Saints offense can improve going into 2024. The thing that I thought was very different going into training camp in 2024 as compared to OTAs and mini camps earlier this offseason came down to the lack of rotation when it came to first team, second team, third team. This to me stood out. Typically during training camps, and especially early on in training camps when no one's super solidified, what you'll see is a lot of rotation when it comes to wide receivers and offensive line and all this other stuff once they get into team drills. We did see quite a bit of rotation, especially on the offensive line when it came to walkthroughs. We saw guys like Landon Young playing at right tackle, but then moving over during individual drills and doing drills at left tackle. We saw guys like Lucas Patrick playing at center and the guard spots while doing additional guard work in individual drills and things like that. We saw Aliudo moving around. He took some snaps during walkthrough at right guard, but then bounced outside to right tackle when he was working on different things. So there's still places where you can find the rotation. But when it came to team drills, the roster was basically the roster, right? The lineup was basically the lineup, and that included like Dallin Holker getting first team reps at tight end ahead of Foster Moreau in some cases. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed consistently on the field. Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, and Xander Horvath consistently on the field. The offensive line, 1 through 5, looking like 1 through 5, all 8 plays or so that we saw of those first team drills. So the Saints this is what I meant by focused. They're focusing down and they're taking a look at what works and they're trying to figure it out. And I think that a really good way for them to do that is to get prolonged looks at what they feel like is their best 11 at any given time. That best 11 can change, but when you go into practice and you say, okay, this is our best 11 today, put those best 11 out on the field and let them work together. Let them build a bit of chemistry. Let them build communication in a brand new offense. Let them get used to Derek Carr's cadence. Let Derek Carr get used to their speed, all those other things. Derek Carr's interception over the middle of the field that went to Demario Davis. The thing that was notable about that to me, aside from Demario Davis lurking and doing a good job, was of making a play on that ball and being able to bring it back for a touchdown, was that Derek Carr is so used to targeting Rashid Shaheed 40, 50, 60 yards downfield that when Rashid Shaheed is flying across the middle of the field, which was not a route that he ran very often in 2023, but when he's attacking the intermediate area, streaking across the middle of the field, all of a sudden the speed is very different 10 yards away. The speed is very different as it's moving laterally across your face 7 yards away. And so getting an idea of what that timing looks like, I think, was a part of why you saw that interception happen. And good on Demario Davis for making a good play of it, because you still celebrate the defense in those cases for being able to make that play. So I think that like these are the things that are different. And some of them are going to need some adjustments, right? You're going to need some adjustment period. That's why you have an acclimation period before you get into pads and all that. They'll do 4 practices and, shirts and shells basically before they get into pads. But this is one of the reasons why you do this at this point. So I think that those are key changes for this New Orleans Saints offense from 2023 to 2024, also from mini camps and OTAs to training camp. And each of those should allow this team to take a step forward, to be more cohesive and congeal a little bit more with their new offense. And hopefully will make it so that this team doesn't need 12 games to get acclimated to their new offense like they needed in 2023 as well. All right, coming up next, Dennis Allen with just a very overt shot across the bow when it came to, or shot across the bow, what am I saying? When it came to Kendre Miller, who suffered another injury on the first day of training camp. And I think it's worth taking a look at who some of those other free agent running backs could be, just in case the Saints need to dip into that market a bit, even if just to maintain the numbers for a little while. Let's break those down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is the same formula that will help you keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to be able to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. What if you're into speed, power, or style, you're going to be able to find exactly what you're looking for at ebaymotors.com. With over 122 parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find that part that you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is always guaranteed to fit the first time, every time, or your money back, because the eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, you're going to be able to make your car the MVP and start bringing home some huge wins over at eBay Motors. So keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. An eBay guarantee fit available only to U.S. customers. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. We talked about Alvin Kamara not pulling punches, but Dennis Allen didn't pull any punches either when it came to a different running back. That's what we're taking a look at here as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, our first post-training camp episode of 2024. We appreciate you very much for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. And so, yes, we have this show, but remember, we'll be live again later on today after practice to bring you all of the news and notes, all the big things that you need to know throughout. And that'll be live over on the Locked On Saints YouTube page and then posted immediately after to audio as well. So everyone will still be able to get that. Remember, send in questions and everything as well, because I'll always try to answer some of those questions in the morning episodes like today. So our first episode came from A.S. Wagasback, who asked a bit about how things look different over on the offensive side for the New Orleans Saints. This next question came from Jonathan Bordeaux, who wanted to know a little bit more about free agent running backs that could be of interest to the New Orleans Saints. So let me set up first why the New Orleans Saints might be interested in a free agent running back potentially. So this doesn't have anything to do with Alvin Kamara and his contract negotiations or anything like that. This actually looks at another running back, second-year running back Kendre Miller. Now, Kendre Miller, as we've highlighted before on the show, has dealt with a lot of different injuries. Came in with an MCL injury, has dealt with some other things like soft tissue injuries and things like that. And it looks like he may have just added another soft tissue injury to his list during individual drills. Before even getting into team drills, Kendre Miller left the practice field with what Dennis Allen updated later by telling us that it was a hamstring injury. And in the midst of telling us that, he also said that Kendre Miller, and I'm paraphrasing here, is a guy that needs to find a way to stay healthy. And also went as far as to say that it's tough to make a team if you're not out on the field. Not it's tough to find your spot in the rotation. Not it's tough to prove yourself. Not it's tough to earn more snaps. It's tough to make the team. And this highlights a little bit of the difference between the patience that you might have with a first round pick that has some injury concerns versus a third round pick that has some injury concerns. And so the Saints can look beyond Kendre Miller if he does end up missing considerable time with this hamstring injury, which I wouldn't be surprised if he missed at least a few practices, because the Saints have consistently been cautious around these types of injuries. And so a guy like Jordan Mims all of a sudden becomes a must-watch player. A guy like veteran James Robinson, same thing. And then, of course, you also have undrafted free agent rookie Jacob Kibodi, who wanted to be able to prove that he can go out there and catch passes and run in this wide zone offense and all sorts of stuff. It looks like he may get an expanded opportunity to do that if Kendre Miller does miss any time. But to Jonathan's point, the Saints could also look to the free agency market. And there's some names that could be particularly interesting to them. So I wanted to bring some of those names to you. and take a look at ones that do and don't. Really, I want to take a look at the ones that do make sense. So as I look at the list of available free agent running backs, which, by the way, this list does not include, as I'm looking at it, Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette could be an option for this team. That could be the Louisiana in me, though, that's drawing that. Like, I could say the same thing about Damian Harris, right? But still something to keep an eye out on. But there's 3 players in particular on the list of available free agents that I think are interesting. The first one is Matt Breida. Now, I know that Matt Breida himself has dealt with injuries throughout his career, but he has found ways and had moments where he has excelled in this type of system, right? The wide zone system, and in particular, the San Francisco system at one point. So that's number one. Another guy that's really interesting is Jerick McKinnon, formerly most recently the Kansas City Chiefs. We've seen the Saints continuously go back to that pot. Tyrann Mathieu, Tano Passanio, Colin Saunders. They love that sort of Chiefs winning mentality. Willie Gay, bring those guys over. So what a guy like Jerick McKinnon, who not only has that same connective tissue with the Chiefs, which is a pipeline that the Saints clearly like in free agency, but also has spent time in not just a wide zone offense, but excelled at different times in the San Francisco 49ers offense, so much, in fact, that earlier this offseason, Jamal Williams recollected watching Jerick McKinnon run like crazy all over his team in a playoff game and go, man, I wish my offense was doing that. So maybe a guy like Jerick McKinnon could make sense. The last guy that I'll highlight is Kareem Hunt, because the Saints actually brought him in for a workout, or tried to bring him in for a workout last year before the season began. And things didn't go as planned. He actually ended up never stepping on the field, as I understand it, for that tryout. Ended up being able to go back to the Cleveland Browns. Now, Nick Chubb is going to start on the physically unable to perform list over in Cleveland, so maybe that brings Kareem Hunt back to the Browns. But if not, he could be somebody that makes sense. But look, there's other players. The Saints could reunite with Eno Benjamin. They could reunite with Lynn Bowden if they want to have him spend more time at running back than wide receiver, which is what he did last year, spent a lot more time at wide receiver than running back. They could have a big reunion with Latavius Murray if they want another guy that has excelled in the outside scheme, as well as somebody that can really stand up and handle himself as a pass blocker and run between the tackles. He did all that for New Orleans at least a few years ago. And of course, Marlon Mack is another one who, injuries and stuff like that are always going to be a part of the question mark. But there are indeed some not so bad options when it comes to running backs that are available on the market right now for the New Orleans Saints. So I personally think that if the Saints do decide to go to the market, whether that is to just bring some guys in for tryouts so that they could start to kind of build a binder, right? This is something that the New Orleans Saints and that NFL teams across the league do all the time, to where they may not look at have a player come in for a tryout because they want to sign them right away, but maybe they want to get a look at them. That way they have some notes and all that on where they are now, so that they can then maybe call them up if they're needed at any point during the regular season. Guys like Matt Breida, guys like Jerick McKinnon, who have not only been in a system like what the New Orleans Saints are bringing in, but have been in the very system that they're hoping to partially mimic, right? I mean, they went and got the guy from San Francisco to be the offensive coordinator. It kind of makes sense. You go and you get the guys that were successful in San Francisco whose offenses were coordinated. You know what I mean? Makes sense. I can't argue that. That's good logic. So I could see the New Orleans Saints going any of those routes. Now, they could also say, not worried about it, really like the guys that are there, not as worried about, Kendre Miller, maybe at some point if they get an update and it's positive and things like that. Totally fine. Totally cool. But if they do decide that they need to go to the market, they have pretty solid options for guys that they could bring in that don't have to play 75% of snaps. That might not have to play 75 snaps in 2024, right? These are just guys that end up coming in and being able to help you contribute to your committee of running backs that are going to be led by Alvin Kamara. That's where I think that this ends up being something where the New Orleans Saints really have an opportunity, should they need to be able to address this position further. So there you go. There's some options for you. Let me know your favorite running back option if the Saints do decide to go to the market. All right, y'all. Appreciate you very much, as always, for being here. We will be back with you tomorrow evening, or tomorrow. Well, yeah, it'll be evening for you, but it'll be afternoon out here. Taking a look at what the New Orleans Saints did in training camp, practice day 2. I'm looking forward to seeing. It's going to be a longer practice, so we're looking forward to seeing maybe a little bit more offense, a little bit more kind of push there. And of course, a little bit more when it comes to simply the length of training camp. Like hopefully we get 3 team drills instead of 2 team drills, things like that. So yeah, we'll update you on all that and get you all the biggest stories that you need live. And then of course, another episode the very next morning to get you caught up and ready for day 3. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Matt Moscona over at Locked on LSU. And of course, Jake Madison over at Locked on Pelicans. Thank you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.